I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Perfect Mismatch from Aries and Red Cat. Perfect Mismatch is a party game of imperfect communication for 2 to 8 players. I'll walk you through the general modes of play shortly because there's 1 competitive and 2 cooperative modes, but first I'm going to give you the premise of how this game plays, and I'm going to do so by playing the game with you. I'm going to take these tokens over here that all have the numbers 1 through 5 on the back, and I'm going to shuffle them up, and I'm going to take one of these tokens, and I got this one. This tells me the number I'm going for from these 5 numbers. So right now I'm the clue giver and I have the number 1 to 5 and these 5 words. The other side is just the same in reverse for players on the other side of the table. So the words we have are blush, silence, game, throat, and homeless. I'm going to put my number over here, but so that you can't see it at least yet. And then I'm going to divide the tokens between these various cards because there's stacks and stacks of cards in the game of various attributes and words, and we currently have 10 in play. So for me, I'm going to say that this is a tricky one. I'm gonna say that my word is more. I will go that way. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about this later. I do think that my word is slightly more lethal than flying. That's what I'm doing, by the way. I'm measuring up how much I think it's one way versus the other. I do think it is not very acidic, but probably more non-stop. The additional commentary perhaps I shouldn't be giving if I was being strictly whatever, but I'm giving some degree of commentary. I do think it's definitely very much that, and then I think it is also maybe a drop over there. Okay, so this is my lineup of how I think this works, and you get to decide if you think my word is blush, silence, game, throat, and homeless. Okay, that's what you have to decide right now. You can pause, you can think about it, you can look at the shot, and then see what you think, and correct, it is indeed blush. Now I'm going to walk through my logic over here, or how you would approach it from the reverse side. So if I'm looking at it from the reverse side without knowing what it was, you look at this and you're like, well, what could these words be? So for example, this is more lethal than flying. So I don't know if any of these are clearly, like homelessness is probably more lethal than flying. Throat is not really. You could argue maybe it's not really flying. A game, I don't know if that's really giving me anything to work with. A non-stop thing, it's more non-stop than acidic. Like a throat, I would think is more non-stop. I think it's less likely to be throat. So I'm going to take throat out because I don't think throats are non-stop. I think that's slightly more acidic. Possibly internal, speaking of which, internal over here, internal versus black. Silence is not really internal. Maybe game. Game could be either of these. Guilty versus magical. Like magical over here, how would that work? Blush could be guilty, but silence isn't. Silence you can make an argument is guilty. A game is more magical, so I think game is out. I'm going to take game out from that one, and we're taking out throat from the other. Homeless is not really guilty, nor is it magical. It's not sweet or restraining. It's possibly lethal. It could be nonstop. Homeless is tough over here. But you go through these clues over here trying to figure out what you think the clue giver was thinking of. That's the core premise of this puzzle. You work your way towards it, and then hopefully you figure out that it's one. As far as how the game actually operates, there's 2 ways to play. There's cooperative and competitive. The competitive has a single mode utilizing this board over here, which will adjust based on the player count. But basically, all players are going to have their own tokens, and you're going to be immediately putting your tokens down as fast as you can on the various spots on the board to see if you can figure out who got what in this game. So for example, let's just play through a few more of these. Put one more token out over here. Let's put this over here. Let's pretend we had these as the guesses. Once you've placed out all your guesses, players are going as fast as possible. This is a speed round effectively. You're going to reveal the first one. Red got 1. They were indeed correct, so they're going to get 4 points. Then we look at the next one. Ooh, they guessed 2. They're wrong, so we're going to slide it off and move the other ones up. Look at the next one. We got, ooh, they got right, so blue's going to get 3 points, and then they got it wrong, so they're going to not get any points. So it's a little bit of speed, but you're going to remove incorrect answers. Play through the rounds, and then see who has the most points. The cooperative modes come in 2 ways. Way 1 is basically the same thing we were just doing, but you don't slide off the tokens. You're going to do the exact same thing where you're going to be guessing, and then ultimately you either got it right or not. So right now in this case, you got 6 points for that right there. So if it's a 4-player game, you're going to get 6 points because of the 2 correct answers, and then there's a point gradient at the end where you go ahead and look at it and see how many points you got across the rounds and how well you did. Alternatively, you can play the prioritization mode. That's where the team gets to operate as a single entity on this reverse side of the board, and they take their one color, all you need is one color in this case, and you sit there and try to think through what is most likely. So you sit through and you're like, you know what, honestly, I think homeless is the most likely, let's go with that. I think that, blush is the next likely, then this. You just go through placing your numbers out. And at the end, when you reveal which one it was, you get points based on where you are up to. So in this case, you got 4 points because it was 1. So you're playing with a more of a priority order. You're going to get points no matter what, but how many points is going to very much be determined based on where you are, based on being right or not, and where you were in that threshold. That is basically how you play Perfect Mismatch. It's a party game of trying to figure out how to communicate with the players. Oh, one last thing I'll say. Well, 2 last things. First of all, there are these, in the competitive mode, there are these second chance tokens you can cash in once per game to place a second guess. And then also you get to rotate these. The game recommends every 3 rounds you swap them out, which for me, honestly, I change these every single round because it takes 2 seconds to change one of these. And then as far as these cards go, you can flip them, or you can even flip one side at a time. So if you flip one side at a time, you can get 4 rounds out of the same cards without ever having the same exact cards. It takes 2 seconds. Honestly, I say you do you. Adjust them and rotate them as frequently as you need to have a good time. And with that, let's get into my thoughts, my review, opinion, all of that. What I like, can see others not like, what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. Starting off with what I like, which is in general, this is a game that thinks outside the box and the way it approaches that hidden communication, that imperfect communication. There's a lot of party games, very successful party games, that give you ways to try to combine words or figure things out or to communicate without talking. There's a lot of cards that are trying to get you to get in each other's heads, a lot of games that try to get you to get in each other's heads as you play through some sort of obstacle. Those obstacles can be as varied as a caveman hitting each other with a giant inflatable stick in a, I can't remember the name of the game. There's a game that does that, where you whack each other with sticks as you try to guide each other's. There's oftentimes hidden words or clues or code word. You're trying to link words together. There's a lot of different games that try to give you that. How do you get either alignment, or competitively, how do you figure out first through some sort of obstacle in communication? And as more and more games come out that do this, it gets harder to be original and creative with what you bring to the table. But Perfect Mismatch definitely did with their little pairing of completely nonsensical words. Like this system, it's almost a little similar to things like Wavelength, or what's that other game? There's a new game similar to Wavelength that does the same concept, where you're trying to grade things on a scale. But in this case, instead of grading things on a scale of cold to hot, which makes sense, you're grading things on a scale of lethal to deep, which doesn't make sense at all. But you still try to think through what is most likely to guide my players to the correct answers with these completely artificial communication restraints that have been given. The additional play modes, the variety of play modes, means you can try to engage with this how you want. I personally find that the real-time fun in competitive can be very, very fun, but I also like the cooperative ranking system where we all communicate together and put a ranking out in play. On the other hand, if you don't like the fact that a single player might ultimately tank the engine because they convince you to place them in the wrong order, going for the cooperative version of the competitive where you're just trying to place them out yourself but scoring points to your team, that can help as well. So the variety of play modes all give you different ways to enjoy the game, and especially if you're someone who doesn't like that real-time pressure, you might enjoy the cooperative modes a lot more than the competitive modes. Overall, this is a fun game that gives you that kind of barrier to communication, just enough information that you can feel rewarded both for coming up with a good sequence of clues, not really clues, but like rankings that guide your players to the correct clue, as well as for in the reverse side of things, piecing together what makes the most sense and working your way through an elimination process. I find it's not just about finding what does match a word, like, oh, this does match deodorant. Often it's about looking for clues and eliminating things, like this means, like these two over here means that it can't be hurricane, or hurricane seems really unlikely, and then working your way towards that one perfect answer as fast as possible in competitive, and then just as good as possible in cooperative. That's basically the overall charm and appeal of the game. As far as things I don't like about the game, I'll say that it doesn't always land. Sometimes the combination of words can be really well done. Sometimes you'll have a sequence where you're like, okay, it's equally none of these things for 3 out of the 5 pair-ups, and when that happens, it can feel frustrating. Although again, I will encourage you to remember, you're looking for lack of information as much as you are information. If you have 3 out of 5 pair-ups that are completely even, where you just split it down the middle, you're like, it's none of those things, I can't help with that. That can be frustrating at first until you realize that if it's not more one side or the other, it's also eliminating cards. That said, despite that caveat, sometimes you just are looking at a lack of information, and when that happens, it's just not as much fun, and sometimes it's out of your control because of luck of the draw of the task card, as well as the various attribute cards in play. As far as I can see others not liking, choosing between 2 impossible combinations can be frustrating. This is one of those games that forces you to communicate within your own limited constraints, and that's something that you might find charming, I find charming, but you also might just find it a frustrating experience where you're being asked to do something that doesn't make sense, and you're like, it's not sweet or free, it's neither. Sweet and free aren't matchups. How do I combine those things? If you don't like that thinking outside the box, this is a game that very much forces you to think outside the box. As far as final thoughts on Perfect Mismatch, it's fun. This is another one of those party games that is about trying to to overcome the obstacles in communication, trying to find that gap, trying to power through and feel clever while both coming up with the clues and while powering through to get the right answers while you play. The variety of play modes is great. The biggest complaint I have against it is that it doesn't always land the same way. There's a lot of games out there that are doing this kind of approach, and because not every single matchup can be as rewarding or as logically be able to follow or add the humor, sometimes there are rounds or combos that really land both from a funny standpoint as well as from the strategic standpoint, and sometimes there just aren't, and that does hold it back a little bit for me. Overall, I'm coming in at a 3.5 out of 5. If you're looking for other game recommendations, definitely check out Da Da Da. That's all one word, D-A-D-A-D-A, if you're trying to find it. It's from the Op, and it's a party game of trying to communicate with sounds and groupings. Surprisingly bizarre, and just like this, kind of thing that you wouldn't necessarily think would work, but somehow manages to work. And again, if you're looking for another thing that I've personally been really enjoying, check out Link City. Link City is a game about trying to build out a city through, again, those kinds of word associations. What belongs with what when you don't otherwise have anything to go off of other than your base intuition and hoping other players can follow along with that base intuition. In any case, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this review helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.